Now, if you've been on personal finance YouTube or subreddits or whatever, you know how much people keep talking about, save as much as you can, invest it all in an index fund and forget about it. And in a couple of decades or something, you'll be a millionaire. And the problem that I have with this kind of strategy is that it almost sells a false narrative to people to be incredibly risk averse and save as much as they can, which I think a lot of people should be doing that, depending on, like, it depends circumstance to circumstance, and a lot of people should be doing that. But for the majority of people, feeding that kind of narrative might not be the best thing for them. And I'm not here to tell you what the best thing for you is. I'm just going to explain some facts and what I've learned in this my own personal finance journey ever since I've started working. So the first myth that I want to debunk, and that this is not rocket science by any means, but I think it's important to get it out on the table, is that investing and saving is not going to make you a millionaire, right? Because how much money you need to have a net worth of 1 million is a function of two things. One, how much you earn, and if you invest any of your savings, how much of a return you can get on those investments. So let's start with the second point, how much of a return you can get on your saved investments. So let's say you're putting your money aside in a high yield savings account, right? In the UK, for example, the highest that I've been able to see is around like 4.5% ever since the Bank of England dropped rates. So 4.5% per year is the amount of interest that you get on your money in a cash IS investments and savings account. So this rate of return, if you negate inflation, first of all, because inflation, if you don't already know, is when things get more expensive, which reduces your real purchasing power. So technically, don't want to explain this concept too in depth, but most of you, if you're watching this video, you're familiar with what it is, right? So realistically, your year-on-year actual money growth is maybe around 2% or something. And assuming a 2% or 3%, yearly growth rate, that's a long time for you to be able to increase your money significantly. Like if we use the rule of 72, if you don't know what that is, if you take the number 72 and you divide it by the rate of return that you get, it'll tell you how long it takes for your money to double. And this is just a mathematical trick. If you want to look it up, it's kind of interesting how it's derived. But assuming a 2% rate of return, and you spent 100K in the market and you haven't been adding or anything, right? You divide 72 by 2%, you get 36. So 36 years for you to double your 100K to 200K on 2%. That's what compound interest argument is, right? Your money just keeps growing over time and you kind of forget about it and it's a snowball, blah, blah, blah. Sure, that's all well and great when you have a large amount of money, but most of us are not saving or earning that much, right? Most of us can afford to maybe put aside 1 or 2K, maybe even less than that if you're just starting in your career or you're in a low-paying job. So and if you're a responsible saver, most of you, if you're earning a salary of 50K in the US after tax or 60K, if you save 30% of that, that's 15K you're saving per year. 15K per year for you to have saved around a million by just saving. It's a heck of a lot. I can't do the calculation exactly, but it'll take you a significantly longer time to be able to do that. So the key message that I'm trying to put across here is, yes, compound interest is a good force, but a savings account, for example, is not going to get you there. Now let's look at the stock market. The stock market, the S&P 500 nets you about 8 to 10% a year before tax. After tax, about 7% per year, right? And again, if we use the rule of 72, now it takes 10 years for our money to double, right? 72 divided by 7 is approximately 10.28 or something like that. So if you consider that rate of return, right, the real rate of return after you remove inflation from the equation, that still takes you quite a long time, quite a bit of time for you to double your money just by leaving it in the market or whatnot. And again, these are average rates. So if you're constantly buying into the market, you're averaging out your cost of entry. So this kind of ends up being broadly true for most people. And that's much better than what you would get on a savings account, right? 2% versus 7%, it's 5 percentage points more. Who wouldn't take that? But it's still not enough for you to be able to get to that point. Now, on the other hand, you have Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin in 2017 was about 2013, 2017 was about 1K. if I invested that 1K, like to buy one Bitcoin, right? And now I'm selling it on the market where it's worth 50, maybe not 50, I'm actually not too sure, maybe 40K, I think was the last time, or 30K. That's $29,000 that you've made in a span of like a decade, right? 29,000 from $1,000, right? That's a 30x return that you've basically just got. I might be wrong on that, but you've multiplied your initial investment by 30 times. So what I'm trying to say is that in the rate of return is an important determining factor on how much real money you like make or how much wealth you generate, right? So that is one way that you can actually hit your financial goal of, say, like reaching 1 million. But it's relying on just broad index funds, for example, or savings account rates is not going to get you there, because you need a lot of time and it's not fast enough. On the other hand, what a lot of people miss is earning, right? That's the main contributor of your net worth. How much you can come on, what salary you can come on, what value you can come on in the market if you're an entrepreneur or a freelancer or whatever. That contributes much more, in my opinion, to what actually people can financially generate down the line, right? So if you're earning, for example, 60K right now in the US or something like that, it's in your power to upskill yourself to maybe generate 100K or 150K, right? By learning the right things, networking with the right people, and getting to the right position. That's very much doable. And by just doubling your salary, you just doubled your income. Versus you can't do that like when you save, right? You can save more, but only to a certain point, which is like how much money you're earning. So you have to really weigh the benefit of increasing your salary versus just, being incredibly spendthrift and saving every penny, because while that is good, it's not going to get you to that financial goal. Now, I realize I'm rambling a little bit, but the point I'm trying to make is there's two factors, like I stated. One is the rate of return that you get on your investments, and the second is how much you earn. And the most commonly pushed narrative is that the rate of return in the market is enough to make for you to achieve your financial goals, which is just not true if you're not earning enough, right? If I'm not saving enough, I'm not going to be able to reach that 1 million figure or 2 million, whatever your goal might be, right? I'm just choosing this number because that's what everyone on YouTube says they want to get or they want to aspire to be. So do keep that in mind. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be saving or investing, right? These are very good habits to have, and I highly encourage anyone anywhere in the world to be doing that, setting aside a fixed portion of your income and always evaluating your spending, because down the line, when you hypothetically, let's say you start earning more, lifestyle inflation is something that really kills wealth. And second of all, if you ever get any kind of windfall sum, right, you win, like not win the lottery, but let's say you get an inheritance or something like that, people are much more likely to be judicious with their financial spending and save that instead of just, wasting it on random things if they've built that habit of saving and spending, because they're more cautious and careful with their money. So it's an excellent habit to build wealth, but it's not the whole picture. I think really getting your earnings higher is the main focus when you're trying to achieve some kind of goal. And this is almost like a complementary habit. It's a complementary factor. So now that I've discussed this, I'm not saying that there's no other way. There are other ways, like what I said. You can invest in the right instruments that give you a high rate of return, but this video is not meant to be how to find those instruments, how to locate them. I just use Bitcoin as an example. I'm not saying go invest in it now and down the line you'll get, I don't know, you'll be a billionaire or something. But what I'm trying to say is there are ways to do it, but generally that in the market, risk is correlated with return. If you've studied some kind of economics or finance classes, that's the basic law. And everyone's risk appetite is different. So that's not necessarily the best thing that they should be doing, right? Going around looking for the next big Tesla or the next big Amazon or Bitcoin, because that the time, effort, and the risk and the outcome is not necessarily always better than if you just try to give yourself realistic skills. Not realistic, valuable skills, go out in the market and get a better paying job, or maybe selling yourself in a better way. That, I think, is what the focus should be for most people when it comes to reaching their financial goals. Now, in my generation, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, wants to be some kind of business owner or whatever, which is great. I don't think that that's a bad thing. And especially with the way that the economy is going in most developed Western countries, this kind of mindset is good to have. But at the same time, people are almost being misled to some extent, especially Gen Z people, that you can, everyone, if you try to be an entrepreneur, you can be like the next Steve Jobs or blah, 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 or you can be very successful. And that's because the only people they see on the internet are the ones who are successful, right? They don't see the thousands of failed startups or the failed stories, and everyone thinks that they can just jump into it with no plan and achieve the best outcome. So this requires an entirely separate video in which I really dive into the nuances, because I've never owned a startup. I've never done any kind of freelancing or anything. So maybe I'm not the best person to comment on this, but what I can comment on is my opinion of people buying into something that is not, the actuality of the situation. Like, I think this is way downplayed. So if you do want to achieve some sort of financial goal, it's a balance between risk and honestly, like, your time. So the amount of time you're willing to put and the risk, that's ultimately what generates you money down the line, right? And in this AI powered, AI generated world that we live in, these variables are getting even more vague or difficult to understand. So at the end of the day, just for most people, I think it's good to be practical, right? Do the things that you think you're good at, first of all. If you want to, like, command a higher salary, and do something that's the market will pay for, that in itself solves that first problem, like, right, earning more. And the second thing is, do save, do invest. These are good habits to build, and be financially literate if you want to achieve $1 million or something, because that's the other part of the equation. But really, I think the focus should be on the first. So those are just my 2 cents.